Hello, one and all. I'm sure if you've seen my last video about the 6-Day War, you will know that I said said one thing. The 6-Day War showed how bad the Arabs were. The Yom Kippur War showed how good Israel was, or the IDF was. So, let me explain something at first. The Arabs, after the 6-Day War, got themselves in shape. I mean, they weren't just a bunch of ragtag guys anymore. I mean, they disposed of all the political officers and got in the real deal. The guys who actually knew what they were doing. And they also came up with a way to defeat the Israeli Air Force, the IAF. They went to their arms supplier, the Soviet Union, and just bought a shitload of SAMs. They also bought a few anti-tank guided missiles, which we will discuss later on. They also were able to attack Israel this time. There was no preemptive strike. Golda Meir said that, to get international support, Israel must be seen as the victim. And once the war started, the Soviet Union started pouring supplies into the Arab states, and the United States started pouring even more supplies into Israel. Now, both the Syrians and Egyptians, Jordan decided to sit this one out. They attacked together. It wasn't like a one-at-a-time attack rule like a cheesy Hong Kong action martial arts movie. They attacked together at the exact same time. And let's talk about how they did this. Both sides of the Egyptians near the Sinai and the Syrians near the Golan Heights, they would just drive right up and run right up to the Israeli positions and then just go back. And they did that for a long-ass time, and it just became part of the scenery to the Israelis. The Israelis also grew overconfident after the 6-Day War, because they were like, oh, the Arabs suck ass, they can't fight. We're Israel. We are protected by the divine Yahweh. We can't lose, especially not to some punk-ass Arabs. But, that arrogance and narcissism led to, some very bad things happening early on. They developed what is known as victory disease. That's what happens when you just win and win and win and win, and you become complacent thinking you're the shiznat and your enemy sucks big floppy donkey dick. And it happened to Napoleon, it happened to Adolf Hitler, it happened to the Japanese in World War II, it happened to a few times in the Indian Wars here in the United States. Oh, God. I can just go on and on and on, but you get the picture. And what happened is the Israel in October of 1930, I'm sorry, not 1930, whatever, it was 1973, October. The Egyptians and the Syrians, they just unleashed themselves on Israel. What happened is when the Egyptians crossed into the Sinai and started blowing their way through, they came up against these tank traps, these huge sand walls that the Israelis predicted would take them about 12 hours to blow their way through. But they didn't blow their way through. They just used these big pressure water hoses, like fire hoses, and just connected them to the Sinai for the waters, the Suez Canal for the water supply, and just started blasting their way through it, and the sand eroded, and they were through it in 3 hours. And oh yeah, the feared IAF, which destroyed the Egyptian Air Force in about 6 years before that, what happened is they came again, as you might expect, and they suffered huge losses because of the SAMs. I mean, they were just torn out of the sky. They lost 1/3 of their Air Force, and the IAF losses were just huge. And so they decided, we're not going to launch any more attacks. We can't because they're slaughtering us with their SAMs. And anyway, the Syrians were a little less successful. They had, one of the big things Israel had going for it was its long reach. Their tanks could just shoot at a huge distance, whereas the Arabs often didn't get that kind of range. What happened is in the Golan Heights, they decided they would focus on the Golan first because the Golan Heights, it's just, only this. It's only a few miles into Israel, but the Suez Canal is just a huge. But I mean, not the Suez Canal. The Sinai is just a peninsula, a huge peninsula with a lot of desert in between that and between the Egyptians and Israel. So they decided that the Egyptians could wait, the Syrians could not. So they focused on one front at a time, but they were still fighting both. Make no mistake about it. And what happened is even though the Arabs rehearsed it a lot, the Egyptians, the Israelis still had the high ground, and they were able to. They hadn't. The Syrians were not quite able to work out how they were gonna cross the anti-tank ditches, and the bridge, the engineering bridging equipment was way in the back, and as a result, the Syrian tankers drive right up to the ditch, and, and then, thanks to the Israeli long-range gunnery skills. But what happened is night fell, and the Egyptians took advantage of that. The Syrians took advantage of that because they had infrared stuff from the Soviet Union, and they started wreaking all kinds of havoc. And eventually the Israelis were able to drive back the Syrians, and when that happened, the Egyptians, they called down to Egyptians like, "Help us! They're kicking our ass! Ah!" And they're fucking us and making them scream their names. Ah! And that was unacceptable. So anyway, the Egyptians charged forward, and they left the protection of their SAM umbrellas and got hit again and again and again by the Israelis. And what happened is that with the Syrians kind of hurt really badly and unable to mount any effective attacks at the time, they rushed into Sinai, and with the Egyptians, with their weakened tank force, they were able to punch through that and get to the SAMs with their tanks, and they destroyed the SAMs. With that, the Israeli Air Force could just fly in and do their thing. They managed to surround the Egyptian Third Army. Now, it's debatable. There's no clear sign that Israel could have held fast, could have crushed them, kept them surrounded, kept the encirclement going. But there's no clear evidence that the Third Army could have escaped. So if the war had dragged on, we don't know what would have happened. But anyway, one thing led to another, and the Egyptians and Israelis had both gained and lost ground in Sinai, and they had gained, and they kept that ground throughout the war. But the war was over in a month. But what most people don't know is that, sure, major combat had ended, but there was a lot of sporadic fighting afterwards, all the time for the better part of a year. And, well, not the better part of a year, but for a few months. And, anyway, I haven't been able to, get all the details down, but man, the IDF did an awesome job. Trust me, if you think the 6-Day War was an impressive victory, look at the Yom Kippur War. It is astonishing. And Golda Meir, she was, interestingly enough, charged with dereliction of duty by the Israeli parliament, and I mean, they wanted her head on a stick. and they found nothing of dereliction of duty. No dereliction of duty, no treason, no conspiracy, no nothing. And people hated her. It sounds very familiar, if you ask me, in today's politics, American politics at least. A certain former president's wife, if I do say so myself, I won't say her name, but I'm pretty sure you know who I'm talking about. Her initials are HC. And what we have here is like the Israelis knew exactly what to do. They knew what to focus on, what their priorities were, and they improvised even when shit got really bad and their entire plan fell apart. And it's just incredible how well they did. They were able to survive all of that. And after Yom Kippur, they started, interesting enough, they probably got nuclear weapons. Now, they won't say they have nuclear weapons, but they have them. And I guess they decided that if they were going to go down, they were going to take the whole Arab world with them. But anyway, it's really, really just, I don't know. The support from the U.S. was very helpful, but these Arabs were getting a lot of support from the Soviet Union, so it was kind of even. And also, it's not commonly mentioned, but Arab armies tend to, when you see their equipment, their Soviet equipment, and the same thing with Africans and Asian countries, is they typically don't have the best Soviet equipment. They have export models. We give export models to Arab countries as well. And what we see is they're not the best is because, if one falls into enemy hands, they can make it back to either the Soviet Union or Russia or the United States, and they get a completely false idea about what the real tank is capable of. And, it was just what the Israeli Defense Force achieved in 1973 was just amazing. It was astonishing. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you found it educational. Like, comment, share, and subscribe, and if you can, leave a donation. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you for your time and attention. Bye-bye for now. Tune in next time. Peace.